Thank you for joining us. If you've joined, been with us through the technical difficulties, I thank you so much for your patience, bearing with old Sean. I'm Sean Mixon, the Thought Decoder. This is my YouTube channel here. My desire is to teach you logic, to help you to fall in love with it, just like I did, to teach you how to clearly state and defend your faith, and empower you through different studies of relevant material that apologists need to know about. Like a recent study we're doing now is Two Powers, a book by Alan Siegel, where he shows that there was a pre-Christian tradition that held a view of two Yahwehs who were complementary and not opposing. So he shows that this is not based on a historical effect of Gnosticism by showing how these two Yahwehs were complementary and not opposing, like in Gnosticism, you have opposing forces. But I am pleased and privileged, and it's such a pleasure to bring to you Dr. J.P. Moreland. He wants me to call him J.P., but Dr. J.P. Moreland. You know, I just love and respect him as a scholar. He's influenced my thinking. Just as a short anecdote, I recently heard Dr. Moreland video on YouTube. He was giving a lecture over arguments for the existence of God. And I was like, I've been watching Dr. Craig for over a decade now. I know these arguments, right? I know what he's going to say. He's going to go through. But I said, well, let me give it a shot. And I went through, and my mind was blown. My mouth was wide open. It was like I had heard those arguments for the first time. And I realized that this was Dr. Moreland. This is some work he did on the argument. And this is, his examples were so clear, but they maintained the concept, but he was able, Dr. Moore, you can't really articulate what he does, but he is able to take very complicated, complex, rigorous information and bring it down to where my little kids can understand it, and I can understand. So it's a pleasure, and without further ado, I'll give you Dr. Moreland. Dr. Moreland, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know we had a few technical difficulties, so if you could be brief if you'd like. How'd you get into philosophy? Where are you from?
Yeah, and thank you so much, my brother, for having me. I was born and raised in a town outside of Kansas City, Missouri. I had a vague understanding of a sort of a watered-down liberal Christianity, but I went to college at the University of Missouri as a chemistry major. My junior year, I heard an intellectual case that the New Testament documents were historically reliable, and there was strong evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. What that did was it gave me a basis to put trust in Jesus and to begin walking with him. And as I began to grow and share my faith, I began to get questions. I had questions myself, and I needed answers. And so I found that the field of philosophy was probably the most helpful and practical field that I had ever studied. So I got my doctorate, and I've been teaching for 35 years or so, but I've been at Biola University in Southern California for about 30 years now. So that's what happened. Right. Well, yeah, good question. I think that I love the concept of the body of Christ. And the reason I love it is it's just genius, because what it says is every single believer has a role to play. We all get to play, and we have a part to play. Our lives are here for a purpose, and I am supposed to play my role, not yours or anybody else's. So if I don't compare myself with you or somebody else, I'm going to compare myself with how I'm growing. Am I making progress over the years? Now, I got to tell you, Sean, I just felt a calling to occupy a place in the academy and to also bring this down to a level where my brothers and sisters in the church would be able to benefit from my research and scholarship. Because to be honest with you, my real passion is evangelism and discipleship and the Great Commission and everything that flows out of that. All the different things we're to do in society, caring for the poor and having good families and all that. So that's why I did it, and it's brothers like you that keep me going, because I see the ministries that you're having, and it kind of makes my life worthwhile.
Well, hey, I'm glad I'm glad that we can come together again. All these eras. And I'm glad that you have a true heart for ministry, so that we could accomplish this. And this is really going to help everyone I know, because I'm going to push this out. And if you're watching, share this video. You know, it's not about me, but it's about the kingdom, like Dr. Moreland said. And it's ironic, because I think that's that same calling to go into academia, to be like, I feel a drive to be one of the best thinkers, the most rigorous analyzers of arguments and truth and evidence that I can be. And I just feel a push, and that makes so much sense, what you said, and I can completely relate to that. You who are watching, if you feel a drive to go into the university, don't let naysayers stop you. Don't let a lack of seeing anyone as an example stop you. I know I didn't see anyone who was an African American philosopher, especially a Christian philosopher who was representing the faith. So I didn't have that a standard in that sense, or a pattern in that sense, but I did have people like Dr. Moreland and Dr. William Lane Craig and Alan Planiga who have transcended. They have crossed racial and socioeconomical dimensions to influence thinkers and young apologists everywhere. So, Dr. Moreland, we're going to transition now into a discussion about just some quick questions about your technique and your philosophical method. So, the title of today's interview is Logic, is Christian Philosophy, and Biblical Justice. So, first of all, what book has most influenced your philosophical method? What book was it that just really showed you, hey, this is the way to do it?
That's a really, really good question. And I think that reading Richard Swinburne, who is a Christian philosopher at Oxford, another person named Roderick Chisholm, who has passed away but was at Brown University, and then having the opportunity to study under and read Dallas Willard at USC sort of marked my understanding of how to go about doing this. And I think that if a person wants to begin somewhere, that try to get a good introductory textbook to philosophy, especially if it's written by a Christian, that would be helpful. And there's some out there. Gary DeWeese and I have written a book called Philosophy Made Slightly Less Difficult. And there are other books. If you go to InterVarsity or Zondervan and get the catalog, and you can call their 800 number and order a catalog. Well, just read an introduction, because philosophy is really studying and trying to think hard about the questions that matter most to us. And so philosophy can help us learn how to think about, is there a God? Is there a soul? What would one be if there is such a thing? Do I have free will? What is free will? What is the purpose of the state? And how should I think about government? And, just a wide range of subjects. So I began to just do that. And probably what happened to me is the more I read and I would say today watched podcasts like you're doing and other things, so that I exposed myself to conversations, I kind of picked up ways of doing this from just reading people doing it and hearing people do it. So if I may give a practical application, continue watching and spreading the word about shows like yours and other shows that may be online that are doing this sort of thing, and start reading. And I know that week by week you'll have suggestions you recommend to people. And don't get frustrated if at first you're confused. Well, learning to do anything in the early stages of learning is frustrating and hard, and you're no good at it. But if you stick in there, if it's playing tennis or learning how to speak Spanish or doing philosophy, guess what? Eventually you're going to become better at it. And boy, I tell you, once you learn a little bit of this, you get hooked because you see how important it is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I felt like I was eating a good steak when you. How you were talking,
man. There's something wrong with you, dude.
It is. My wife says it's because I'm a nerd, but I just think this is my calling. But I just sit and watch you sometimes and read, and it's like, that is good. Like, and just part of starting this channel is because I didn't have too many people to share this stuff with.
Right.
And I was like, well, and it just burns in me. And I was like, you know what? I might as well just hit record and go live and just someone that wants to hear this and needs to hear this.
Absolutely.
And so how many hours would you say that you've read over the past few years, like consistently? Was that something you thought about, or is it just something that just happened?
Yeah, very good question again. I've gone through phases where there will be a period of time in my life, like say a couple of months, where I'm kind of on the road speaking a lot. So I don't do as much reading then. And then there'll be other times when I'll have a fair amount of time off. So I try to read maybe a couple of 3 hours a day. It used to be like 5 or 6, but I'm 72 and I've kind of run out of some energy. But you got to remember, I have a job that lets me do that, and so other people who have other lines of work need to be careful. Real key is exercise, because if you want to be consistent in reading, you have to have the energy. And if you're working and you're trying to read, sometimes you just run out of gas. And so my word to people is try to be sure you're getting a little bit of exercise, because that kind of picks you up and kind of re-energizes you. But I would say in the summer when I have more time, I might read in chunks. Like I might read 8 hours on Monday and Tuesday, and then not read Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday much at all. Or I might just try to do, like right now I'm doing research and I'm studying 3 hours a day, I'd say, at least 5 days a week. And
can I ask you, is this the research where you're looking at the California Board of Education and looking at how Darwinism has impacted. Okay, because I've watched you here recently. I was like, man, I've never heard of this. Is interesting. I was like, oh my god.
No, you're absolutely right. It's very, very sad to me, and I did do a book about a year ago or so called Scientism and Secularism, and that sounds like a $1.98 word. But what scientism basically means is that the only way you can know what's real is if you can test it in chemistry and physics and the hard sciences. And if you can't do that, you can go ahead and believe it if you want to, but you don't have a clue if you're right or wrong. So you can't know anything in ethics or in religion or whether there's a God or a soul or anything like that. And I just think that's terrible. I think it's so the Darwin business. The reason, Sean, that scientists cling to Darwinism with a fervency that goes beyond the evidence for it. And there is some evidence for it. I'm not going to dispute that. But my goodness, it's far from a slam dunk. And there are huge problems with it. But the reason that this is clung to is because there's no other alternative. What are you going to be, an intelligent design advocate and believe that God was somehow involved? Well, you can believe that, but you can't prove that scientifically. So the story goes. And so what troubles me, my brother, is not so much the Darwin business, though that does bother me. What the deeper issue is that we're being told what the limits of knowledge are. And we're told that you can only know things in the sciences. And so if you try to tell people things about God are right and wrong, you're legislating morality and religion because you don't know what you're talking about. You have beliefs and that's all you got. Well, I'm sorry, I don't go along with that. I think that's nonsense.
That was an interesting point. I haven't heard that point made before. That you said it's not so much Darwinism, which is like let's say a scientific theory.
Yeah.
A scientific theory, but it's the philosophy that is presupposed by Darwinists.
Exactly, and I'm not saying that Christians don't need to offer intelligent critiques of Darwinism. Don't hear me saying that. But what I am saying is that there's an underlying thing that's deeper than that's going on. And Darwin himself knew it. Because in his day, and I've read about this from secular historians of science, the reason Darwinism won the day in a short period of time was not due to the evidence. In fact, it is widely acknowledged that the creationist predictions turned out to be more empirically verified than Darwinist predictions.
Wow.
For example, Darwin said that if my theory is true, the fossil record will be teeming with hundreds of thousands of transition forms. Well, in the last 100 years after Darwin, there is a handful of possible transition forms that have been subject to criticism by other unbelieving scientists. So the creationists said there won't be, and they turned out to be right. The reason Darwin won is because Darwin provided a way to get theology to get God out of science and to make it natural, to make it a natural science, so that the only explanations that counted were purely natural explanations. You can't appeal to God intervening to explain something because that's not what science does. Well, guess what? If you then go on and say, and by the way, science is the only way we know anything, well, what does that do to theology and history and all these other fields? Well, they're just a bunch of theories that are, shuffled around. And then Christianity becomes a kind of a fairy tale that you can believe if you need that. But have you ever witnessed to somebody and they've said this? Well, look, you can't prove that scientifically. Well,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I have. And what they're assuming is that unless you can prove it scientifically, then you can't know it. Well, wait a minute.
Wow.
Science is a way of knowing, but there are other ways to know things. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
why would I want to limit that? So that's the underlying deeper issue that bothers me. Many Christians listening to us, in light of this scientism shift, probably may have gone with what Christians did, and that was to abandon the use of reason and shift
Wow.
to faith as a way of protecting Christianity from attack. Because
Wow.
if Christianity doesn't have anything to do with evidence and reason to begin with, then how can you find evidence against it? Evidence doesn't matter. So
Mm.
it's ultimately about emotion and how
Ah.
I feel and my changed life. So it was a way of kind of being protecting ourselves, and it was not the right way to go. It's like being a pacifist. When the
Hmm.
enemy's breaking into your house, you just say, well, I'm not going to shoot you. I'm going to put I don't have any weapons. Take what you want. Well, I'm not inclined to do that myself.
Right. Or it's kind of like accepting contradictions.
Hey, there you go.
Like saying, well, some contradictions do obtain in life. You need to open your that kind of
Exactly.
response. It's interesting because I've heard you in different places mention different pieces of what you just said, but now I don't know if it's because I'm speaking to you one on one, but I can see the logical connections. So scientism gives rise to a methodological naturalism, where only science gives knowledge, and only the methods of science,
Yes.
observational methods, empirical methods, are used within science, and you cannot posit God as a cause within any of your theories to produce any of the effects. And you're pointing out that the result of that, one motivation was that these scientists wanted to separate their science from the theologians, because what was it, called natural philosophy back
Yes.
in the days?
Yes.
And so once they wanted to separate, the Darwinist one out, and as a result, instead of the Christian, once eventually after years and years, or so much time, once the Christians see that these fields are dominated by Darwinists, and are basically people who are religious, they didn't go onto their turf to understand their methods and to try to refute them on
Right.
their own territory, but
Exactly.
they kind of ran away and cowered and tried to protect themselves from evidence by saying, well, I feel him in my heart. That's why I know he's real. I know it's contradictory, but I believe it anyway.
There you go. And see, but when we withdrew and we made it all about blind faith, that left a vacuum in the culture, because now Christians weren't mixing it up in the world of ideas. So
Wow.
the culture has a vacuum, and guess what fills it? Secularism, leftism, and we begin to
Wow.
have a kind of a postmodern relativistic view that fills that vacuum.
Mm.
And we're kind of trying to get in now. And hey, would you guys listen to
Mm.
us? And their people are saying, well, why should I listen to you since you don't know anything? You got a bunch of
Mm.
personal feelings, and I don't need to hear a word you're saying. Leave me alone. So
Right. So that shows the importance of this idea that I'll often hear you say, that Christians need to reclaim their faith as knowledge.
exactly.
Not just because unless we position ourselves as having knowledge, no one wants to hear what we have to say.
No, and rightly so. I mean, because I'm just telling them how I feel. And so you're absolutely right. And that's why it's important for us to learn why we believe what we believe.
Mm,
It's that simple. So I say to your viewers, don't be embarrassed if you have questions or doubts. That's different than unbelief. Unbelief is
mm.
this attitude of heart that says, I set myself against believing. A
Wow.
doubt is, hey, I want to believe, but I got problems. Help. There's a whole different. So don't be
Mm,
embarrassed, but get and write them down and get answers. They're out there. Just keep looking for
mm. And so now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been thinking about your area of expertise more generally. I mean, you're just so good at like metaphysics. You made me just like reconfigure like the typology in my mind of which branches of philosophy. So I see you as being a metaphysician,
them. Yes.
and you specialize in philosophy of mind. Is it a branch of metaphysics?
Yes.
Okay, okay, and so we went over your favorite philosopher. So I guess we can transition now into Christian philosophy, or after this question. But when did you first learn logic?
Well, I was in. It was in the 70s. I came to Christ
Wow.
in what they call the 60s, and as I began to read and to witness and try to grow and learn, I got a hold of an introductory logic textbook, and I read a good portion of it just so I could understand not the real technical stuff, but some of the basic principles of reasoning that would help me in sort of everyday life. And and then I began to learn by using it, and I tried to learn
Mm,
by when I'd listen to the news, I'd try to spot fallacies. And, I had a little sheet of paper with
wow.
some of them on there, and I'd say, okay, I recognize that one. And, I was
Mm,
trying to just get them woven into my thinking. And eventually it took time, but they sort of became part of my second nature. And then when I got further down the road, I took some advanced kind of logic classes in graduate
mm.
school, but I don't think everybody needs that. But there's a
Okay.
basic logic
Hmm.
that you could get any intro text in any college and just read the early pages and some of the things they say. When they're not too symbolic or anything, and it's just has wide application. It's helped me out argue my wife on a number of occasions. That's the good news. The bad news is I end up losing the war, and so that's never. So I'm trying to rethink that strategy.
I bet. Let me ask you this, because I was when I think I won, I lost with my.
Yeah.
I was like, hold on, that
How did that
I
happen?
was right about this, but now I'm okay. I apologize.
There you go.
But so she has a skill set that I don't think I don't know what it is.
It goes.
But what'd you say?
No, you go ahead.
Oh, oh. So my next question is: you've written a lot of different articles. Do you write out a formal argument? Do you kind of have that in your head? Because to me, I would be afraid of someone just reading my work and just like easily refuting me.
Yeah.
So, do you write out a formal argument for what you've argued in all of your books?
What I do is, suppose I want to make a case for something. What I have found helpful in all of this, Sean, would be to try to start by reading something brief on it, like an encyclopedia article. So
Mm,
online, there's the Stanford Encyclopedia or Wikipedia, and I
mm-hmm,
might try to start with just trying to get an overview of what this thing like free will. So I might say, well, I'm pretty confident that I have common sense free will. Okay, so I might say, well,
mm-hmm,
what is free will? Well, so I'll poke around and I'll come down. I realize there are a couple of different views on this. So I write that down, and then I might start doing a little bit more work on a couple of issues that I discovered when I read that initial sort of brief overview of this, that I need to put more meat on those bones. You understand what I'm saying? And so once I do that, then I might end up saying, okay, I think I know enough about this. I want to try to state some thesis I want to defend or critique. So I try to state it if I can, maybe in a few sentences or something like that. And then what I do is I try to come up with arguments for that. Then I try to anticipate arguments that will be raised against it. Or in the reading I've read, I'll try to quote the arguments that have been raised against my view and answer those. Okay, so here's why I hold this. Now here are problems, and here's my response. Then I might turn to the alternative view, like the other view of free will, called compatibilism, which is not my view. And I might try to state it and say, now here are the problems. Here are the reasons people hold this, and here's my response to those, and why I don't think this works. And so that's kind of a way to do it. You try to state a thesis you want to defend. You do that. You try to think through what are people going to say against this. And if you got a buddy that you can send it to that might help you, criticize it, that always helps. And then you try to, after you've responded to those, you shift to the alternative view and try to make a case against it. And that's kind of a nice little way of thinking about it.
So if just to summarize for our listeners and myself as well.
Yeah.
You basically do a general overview to kind of test the waters, see what's out there about a different topic. Then while you're doing that, you notice two things, that there are different views, and then you notice there are certain issues rise to the surface. Then you start looking at the issues and you say, You used to begin to form an opinion about those issues.
Yes.
And you state that opinion, which is really the conclusion of your argument. Your thesis is the conclusion of your argument, which is like your claim. It's your claim.
Exactly.
And once you do that, you develop a positive case for your claim or your position. You respond to objections, and then you go on the offense, and you attack other views who have alternative to your thesis.
Exactly. And I'll try to surface the arguments that they offer and show why they don't work. I try to be honest about it. I might end up concluding this is still a problem for my view, and I don't think I've got a real good solution right now. But in light of the 4 reasons I have for it, I think that's sufficient for me to hold it, even while I'm admitting that I still have work to do on number 5, or something like that. So that's kind of a method that I use, and it's usually pretty helpful.
Okay, that was absolutely helpful. So while you're doing that, do you have a sense in your mind of your argument form, like formally? Because I've read several of your books where you actually list, on the soul, you go through.
Yes. If I can get to where I can put it out in a set of premises with a conclusion, so that I have a kind of a logical presentation of the argument, yes, I'll try to do that. Absolutely. And if a person can't do that, well, then just try to state as clearly as you can what it is you're asserting and what are the reasons you think that's true, and just do your best. You don't have to do that, but I think if you're able to, it makes it a little clearer for people.
Right. And you just confirmed something I've been thinking about, formal arguments, and I really see them as being some summary,
Yeah, exactly.
summary form. It's not that you can come up with the argument first, but it's that after you've digested the information, after you tried to argue, then you can just reflect,
Exactly.
and then you can kind of do like a outline, and then you can check it logically. But that's like a later thing,
It
or
is.
maybe you can come up with it. I mean, you can maybe just sit there
Yeah.
and
Yeah, but generally that usually comes later after I've sort of poked around a little bit.
okay. And I don't want to keep you all night, and but we do have two. We wanted to give a demonstration, and then talk about biblical justice.
Okay.
You okay with that?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
do it.
Okay. So here is an argument. Here's an argument, and this is a demonstration of Christian philosophy and how it works. So what if I told you, Dr. Moreland, I've heard you mention things about properties and propositions, and I've even saw that you wrote a book on universals. But when I think about what I'm taught about God, God has aseity. He is self-existent. So, but when I combine his aseity with the doctrine of creation, which seems to be that God has created everything other than himself, how it seems to me that there can be no things like numbers, because those things can't be created. And if they can't be created, then God didn't create them. And if he didn't create them, then the doctrine of creation is false. How would you respond to that, given your background?
No, that's very nicely put. Very nicely put. Way to go. And this is where, when you read and study, you come up with distinctions that help keep from conflating things. So what I would do on this is I would first of all draw a distinction between what I consider to be strong aseity and weak aseity, or you might say strong necessity and weak necessity. Now, strong necessity would be if a being were strongly necessary, it would exist in all possible worlds. It could not exist. And it does not owe its existence to anything else. It is self-existent. Weak necessity would be some being like the number 2 or redness or triangularity that would exist in all possible worlds and could not exist, but it owes its existence to another being that necessarily holds it and sustains it in being. So only God has what I would consider to be strong necessity. Now, what I have to do then...
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Could I give an example of what you just said? Or you tell me if this is an example. So it seems like you're saying that some things can be they can be what do I want to say? Exist. They can be necessary. They can exist in every possible world, but their existence implies the existence of other things.
Yes.
So like the idea of a triangle implies the existence of shapes.
Yeah, exactly. And suppose that being shaped is a property that is a necessary being. That I would still say that it owes its existence to God's sustaining it in being, And therefore, I have two different kinds of creation.
Hmm.
The one kind of
Ah.
the one kind of creation is bringing something into being at a point in time,
Oh.
and that would apply to contingent beings, beings that exist but could have not existed, like the universe or me or a mountain or what have you. And then there is a deeper sense of creation that was noted by the medieval philosophers, and I'm sure and that is where God creates things by sustaining and holding them in existence.
Hmm.
And so I would say, now that isn't bringing them into being, but that is being the thing that is causing them to exist. And so I would say that God is the creator of these abstract objects, in that he doesn't bring them into being, but he is responsible for why they exist. He sustains he is a creative sustainer. And that was a concept that Aquinas offered about God being the cause of some things insofar as they had dependence on him. So it wasn't just that he brought them in existence and that was creation and it's over with. That then a new kind of creation kicked in, where God was now the creator, in that they still are sustained or depend on him for existence. So that is a way that I would deal with that. And I would also say God doesn't create his own attributes, because he just kind of is stuck with them. I mean, he just happens to be omnipotent, and that's a brute fact. There's no further explanation of that. That's just the way he is. He didn't have a choice of the matter, you might want to say. He just found himself to be omniscient, and whether he liked it or not, he was. Although, of course, he loved it, I'm sure.
Let me ask you if I can push back on this. I hear people say that all the time in interviews. What if someone says that the claim that God sustains these things into being it's not informative, because it seems to be to state a position and not explain, give a solution to the problem, which is how could, because it seems to be I don't know, but it seems possible. And now I'm putting on my philosophy hat, but I think I want to offer something that's rigorous enough for people of all levels, but we're stating it in a clear way. I really believe you're putting it in a simple way. So it seems to me that these abstract objects could exist if there was a possible world where God didn't exist. But I know that. Maybe is this the difference between metaphysical necessity and logical necessity?
Yeah, that's right.
Like it may be.
Like it's logically possible that water is not H2O. There's no contradiction in saying water's not H2O. That's not a contradiction. But it is not metaphysically possible, because given that we have discovered the very essence of water is H2O, even God could not create a world where there was water that wasn't H2O. He could create a world where there was a lookalike, or you might say fool's water, that like
our water.
That looked like water and so on, but it was XYZ instead of H2O. He could do that. So metaphysical necessity is different than logical necessity. And so maybe this will help. Sometimes it turns out in philosophy or in life that you have two views that are independently reasonable. I mean, you look at the work that they do for you. Like if I believe that there's a God, I've got a tremendous explanation for the universe and the fine tuning and the origin of morality and all the rest of it. So let's just assume it really makes sense to me to hold that God is the creator and so on. But now I've got this other problem, and I'm trying to make sense out of mathematical truth and and all these other things. And let's suppose that I end up concluding that there just has to be these universals that are abstract objects, because that does so much work for me. And if I deny it, I end up having to deny truth and all kinds of things.
I see.
Now I'm kind of stuck. And so I have to find a way to put them together. And it's a little bit ad hoc. I admit that. But if it can be, so that does count against it a little bit. But it may have more gains than you lose by calling it ad hoc, because I really have no independent reason for believing that abstract objects are sustained in existence by something else other than my commitment to a deity and theism. So I admit to you it's ad hoc. So I don't hold to it because it does explanatory work. I hold to it because it is a way of harmonizing things that I already have that do explanatory work themselves. And that gives me rational justification for holding this view, because it allows me to continue to hold two views that are independently rational, let's just assume. And so that's why I hold the view.
And now, traditionally, the solution, or the Christian take on this, has been divine conceptualism.
Yeah,
where
you're well thought out, man.
Well,
I'm impressed. I kid you not.
Really?
No, listen. How many times do I find talk show hosts that talk this way to me?
Really? Wow, I'm glad I got this on tape.
Yeah. You can use it against your wife.
I can tell the world. Look, Dr. J.P. Moreland is impressed.
This is good stuff, man. Really, I kid you not. But yeah, that these abstract objects were in some sense ideas in God's mind, or concepts in God's mind. And I do think that is a way to go. It's not a way that I can go for a variety of reasons. I mean, if God had the property of being read in his mind would be read. So I have a problem with that.
Wow.
So I have to say that what God has is the concept of being read in his mind, which is about the property of being read, just like my concept of a duck is about a duck, but I can't eat my concept of a duck. I can eat a duck. And so I would say that concepts in God's mind are about abstract objects. They're not reduced. Abstract objects aren't reducible to them. But look, this is getting kind of
when I'm talking about these matters. But thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you. And why don't you have a wonderful evening? And we will schedule your next time on.
Well, Sean, let's do it again. And this has really been a lot of fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Right, God bless you, man.
Thank you for joining me today. It's first time doing an interview, and I hope that you, as aspiring apologists, as aspiring philosophers, world changers, people who are passionate about your faith and you want to defend it, and you are willing to go to the enemy's territory to defend your faith. Hope you got something from this. And stay tuned for more. Dr. J.P. Moreland has just said that he will come back. Went a little bit over my time, but hey, this is real. I'm not going to even edit this. I'm going to show you all the mistakes. It's good for me to see. So as I get better, I can look back and say, wow, I screwed that up royally. But thank you. This has been Sean Mixon, the Thought Decoder, here where we teach you logic. We teach you how to clearly state and defend your faith. And today, we've had the legendary, the man, the myth, the legend. I just said legend. Dr. J.P.